There is something happening to millions of seniors across America right now that nobody is talking about loudly enough. It starts quietly. Maybe you notice it on a Tuesday morning, standing at the kitchen sink. A strange wave of weakness that moves through your legs, or you stand up from the couch and the room tilts just slightly, just enough to make you pause and hold the armrest. Or you're walking down the hallway and something feels off. Not painful, not dramatic, just unsteady, like the floor beneath you isn't completely trustworthy anymore. And in that moment, something shifts inside you that goes far beyond the physical, because you think to yourself, is this it? Is this what the rest of my life feels like now? If that sounds familiar, I need you to stay right here, because what I'm going to share with you today is not what your doctor told you at your last appointment. It is not just aging. It is not something you simply have to accept. And by the time we get to the middle of this conversation, you are going to understand something about your body that most seniors never learn until serious damage has already been done. My name is associated with this channel for a reason. At Dr. Silas Redford Wellness, we don't do surface-level health talk. We go deeper. We look at what the research actually says, we translate it into plain, honest language, and we bring it directly to people who deserve real answers. People like you. If this is your first time here and you want to keep receiving this kind of information, please take just one moment to like this video and subscribe. It costs you nothing, and it means everything to this community. Now let's get into what's really going on. Let me tell you about a man named Eugene. He's 68 years old, lives outside of Phoenix, Arizona, retired military, disciplined his whole life, takes his medications, goes to bed at a decent hour, eats reasonably well. But over the past 18 months, Eugene has been experiencing something he can't quite explain to anyone. He feels weak in a way that has nothing to do with effort, not the satisfying tiredness after a long walk. A deeper weakness, like his body is running on a battery that never fully charges. He gets dizzy when he stands up too quickly. He's had 2 moments where he felt like he might actually fall, which terrified him more than he admitted to his wife. His doctor checked his heart, ran blood work, told him things looked fine for his age. And Eugene went home feeling dismissed, confused, and quietly afraid. What Eugene's doctor didn't look for is what we are going to talk about today. Because the real cause of what Eugene was experiencing, and what millions of seniors just like him are experiencing, is something that sits at the intersection of circulation, the nervous system, and a process most people have never heard of. And when you understand it, everything clicks into place. Here is the first thing you need to know. Weakness, dizziness, and unsteadiness in seniors are not one problem. They are symptoms, and symptoms have causes. The mistake that happens far too often in standard medical care is that these 3 symptoms get bundled together under the umbrella of getting older and handed back to the patient with a recommendation to be careful. But researchers who study aging, cardiovascular health, and neurology have been building a very different picture. A picture that points to specific, identifiable, and in many cases treatable causes. And today I want to walk you through the most significant ones, not to overwhelm you, but to give you something your last doctor's appointment probably didn't, real understanding. Let's start with something called orthostatic hypotension. It sounds complicated, but the concept is remarkably simple and the implications are profound. When you stand up from a sitting or lying position, your heart and blood vessels have to rapidly adjust to gravity. Blood naturally wants to pool downward in your legs. Your cardiovascular system has to compensate almost instantly, tightening blood vessels and increasing heart rate to maintain blood pressure to your brain. In a younger, healthy cardiovascular system, this happens seamlessly. You stand up and you feel nothing unusual. But after 65, this compensatory mechanism slows down. The blood vessels become less elastic. The nervous system signals travel more slowly. And the result is a temporary but real drop in blood pressure to the brain in those first few seconds of standing. That's why so many seniors feel dizzy, lightheaded, or weak when they get up. It's not imagination. It's not weakness of character. It's a measurable physiological event happening inside their body every single time they rise from a chair. And here's what most doctors rarely explain about this. Orthostatic hypotension is not just uncomfortable, it is dangerous. Studies show it significantly increases the risk of falls, fainting, and in people with existing cardiovascular conditions, even cardiac events. One major study found that adults over 65 with orthostatic hypotension had a substantially higher rate of falls, resulting in serious injury compared to those without it. And yet, in a standard 15-minute checkup, blood pressure is almost never measured both sitting and standing. So this condition goes undetected, day after day, fall after fall. But that is only one piece of the puzzle. Stay with me, because what comes next surprised researchers when the data first emerged. The second major cause is something called sarcopenia. Now, most people have heard of muscle loss as a general concept, but sarcopenia is specific. It is the accelerated, age-related loss of both muscle mass and muscle function that begins in earnest after age 60 and picks up significant speed with each passing year if it is not actively countered. And here is the part that changes how you understand the weakness you or someone you love may be feeling. Sarcopenia does not just make you weaker in the obvious sense. It disrupts the entire proprioceptive system, which is the network of sensors embedded in your muscles, tendons, and joints that constantly tells your brain where your body is in space. When muscle mass decreases, these sensors become less active. Their signals to the brain become quieter, and the brain's real-time map of your body's position becomes less accurate. The result is not just reduced strength, it is reduced steadiness, reduced reaction time, reduced ability to catch yourself when you stumble, and a growing, quiet sense of physical insecurity that affects everything from how you walk to where you're willing to go. Think about a woman named Evelyn, 73 years old, former dance instructor from Charleston, South Carolina, a woman who spent 40 years teaching other people how to move with grace and precision, and now she holds the banister on both sides going down the stairs. She stopped volunteering at the community center because the parking lot has uneven pavement. She doesn't tell her children how frightened she is because she doesn't want to worry them, but inside, she is grieving a version of herself she feels slipping away. What nobody told Evelyn is that sarcopenia is not inevitable in the way that most people assume. It responds to intervention. It responds to targeted movement. And the research on this is not tentative. It is some of the most well-replicated data in geriatric medicine. Muscle can be rebuilt at 70. Proprioceptive pathways can be retrained at 75. Evelyn's story does not have to end the way it was heading. Now let's talk about the nervous system directly, because this is the layer that most senior health conversations never reach, and it is critically important. Running through your entire body is a network called the peripheral nervous system. These are the nerves that carry signals between your brain and your muscles, your organs, your skin, and your blood vessels. As we age, these nerves can become damaged or less efficient through a process called peripheral neuropathy. Sometimes this is caused by diabetes, sometimes by vitamin deficiencies, particularly B12, which is chronically low in a huge percentage of seniors, sometimes by long-term medication use, sometimes by circulatory issues, and sometimes simply by the gradual wear of decades. When peripheral nerve function declines, the signals traveling between your feet and your brain slow down or become distorted. Your brain receives incomplete information about the ground beneath you. Your feet don't feel the surface correctly. Your balance corrections arrive a fraction of a second late, and that fraction of a second, in the context of a stumble, is the difference between catching yourself and falling. What doctors rarely explain is that B12 deficiency alone, something that affects an estimated 40% of adults over 60, can cause peripheral neuropathy severe enough to meaningfully impair balance. And B12 deficiency is almost entirely correctable with supplementation or dietary changes. Yet millions of seniors walk around with it undiagnosed because a comprehensive nutritional panel is not a standard part of most routine checkups. There is something deeply frustrating about that, and I want you to hear it clearly. The weakness you feel may not be age. It may be a vitamin your body stopped absorbing efficiently years ago. Let me tell you about a man named Walter, 69 years old. Retired pharmacist from Wisconsin, knows a lot about medications, careful with his health. Had been experiencing a strange tingling in his feet for over a year, along with increasing unsteadiness when walking on uneven ground. He assumed nerve damage from a back issue he'd had years ago, but his daughter, a nurse, insisted he get a full nutritional panel done. His B12 level came back critically low. He began B12 injections under his doctor's supervision. Within 8 weeks, Walter told his daughter something that made her cry. He said the ground felt solid again, that he hadn't realized how disconnected his feet had felt from the earth until suddenly they felt connected again. 8 weeks. A vitamin. That's all it took. Now I want to address something that rarely gets discussed in the context of weakness and dizziness, and that is the role of dehydration. Not dramatic, obvious dehydration. Chronic, mild dehydration. The kind that most seniors live with every single day without knowing it. Here is something that changes after 65 that almost nobody warns you about. Your thirst mechanism becomes less reliable. The signals that used to tell you when you needed water become slower, weaker, and less accurate. This means that by the time a senior feels thirsty, They are already significantly dehydrated, and the effects of even mild chronic dehydration on the aging body are remarkable. Blood volume decreases, which worsens orthostatic hypotension when standing. Electrolyte balance is disrupted, affecting how nerve signals travel. Muscle contractions become less efficient. The brain itself, which is roughly 75% water, begins to function less sharply. And all of this combines to produce exactly the cluster of symptoms we're talking about: weakness, dizziness, unsteadiness, fatigue, and mental fog that feels indistinguishable from what people call just getting older. Many seniors, particularly those taking diuretic medications for blood pressure or heart conditions, are at even greater risk of chronic dehydration because their medications actively push fluid out of their bodies. And yet the conversation about hydration in senior health is almost always reduced to a pamphlet that says, drink 8 glasses of water a day. What it rarely says is that for many seniors, thirst is no longer a reliable guide, that you have to drink deliberately, on a schedule, whether you feel thirsty or not, and that the weakness you feel by mid-afternoon may not be fatigue at all. It may be your body quietly asking for water. And the worst part is how easy this is to address, and how rarely it gets addressed because it never gets connected to the right symptoms. Let's talk now about medications, because this conversation has to happen even though it's uncomfortable. The average American over 65 takes between 4 and 7 prescription medications daily. Some take more. And the cumulative effect of multiple medications on blood pressure, fluid balance, nerve function, inner ear fluid, and cognitive alertness creates what pharmacists call drug-drug interactions and what patients experience as feeling generally, persistently off. Certain blood pressure medications, particularly those in the calcium channel blocker and beta blocker families, can cause dizziness and weakness as direct side effects, especially when dosed at levels established years ago when the patient was younger and heavier. Certain sleep medications alter the sensitivity of balance-related neural pathways in ways that persist well into the next day. Certain antihistamines, including common over-the-counter allergy drugs, have strong sedative effects on the aging nervous system that most seniors don't realize they're experiencing. This is not an argument against medication. Medications save lives. But it is a strong argument for having a specific conversation with your doctor about whether your current medication regimen, including doses and combinations, is still calibrated for who you are today, not who you were 5 years ago when some of these prescriptions were written. Bodies change, blood pressure changes, weight changes, kidney function changes, and a prescription that was perfectly appropriate in 2018 may be quietly contributing to weakness and dizziness in 2025 in ways that no single doctor has connected, because no single doctor has looked at the full picture. You deserve a doctor who will look at the full picture, and if you don't have one yet, this conversation is the beginning of knowing what to ask for. Now let's bring everything together into something practical, because I know that information without direction can feel overwhelming, and the last thing I want is for you to leave this conversation feeling more anxious than when you arrived. If you have been experiencing weakness, dizziness, or unsteadiness, here is what I want you to consider taking action on. Start by asking your doctor to measure your blood pressure both sitting and standing at your next visit. Just those 2 readings. If there is a significant drop when you stand, orthostatic hypotension may be a factor, and there are specific manageable ways to address it. Ask to have your B12 level checked, along with vitamin D and a complete metabolic panel. These are not exotic tests. They are standard blood work that simply does not always get ordered unless you ask. Bring a complete list of every medication and supplement you take, including over-the-counter drugs, to your next appointment. Ask your doctor or pharmacist to review the list specifically for any that could contribute to dizziness, low blood pressure, or balance impairment. Start drinking water before you feel thirsty. Set a gentle reminder if you need to. Small, regular sips throughout the day matter more than you might realize. And begin moving in ways that specifically challenge your balance and rebuild muscle, even if it starts with just standing at the kitchen counter and shifting your weight from one foot to the other for 60 seconds at a time. These are not dramatic interventions. They are not expensive, but they are the kinds of changes that, compounded over weeks and months, produce the kind of improvements that people describe as feeling like themselves again. Eugene, the retired military man from Arizona, eventually pushed his doctor for a more thorough evaluation. His orthostatic hypotension was identified and managed through a combination of medication adjustment and hydration strategy. His B12 was borderline low, and he began supplementing. He started a simple resistance training routine with resistance bands 3 times a week. 4 months later, he told his wife that he hadn't felt dizzy in 3 weeks, that he walked with his shoulders back again, that he stopped being afraid of the stairs, That is not a miracle. That is what happens when someone stops accepting a dismissive answer and starts asking better questions. You have spent decades showing up for other people, for your family, your community, your work. And now I want to ask you, sincerely and directly, to show up for yourself in this same way. Not because your best years are behind you, because they may not be, because the body has a remarkable capacity to respond at any age when it is finally given what it actually needs. The weakness you feel does not have to be permanent. The dizziness does not have to become your new normal. The unsteadiness does not have to define how you move through the world. Small steps lead to real change. One question at your next doctor's appointment. One glass of water more than usual today. 1 minute of balance practice at the kitchen counter tomorrow morning. These are not small things. These are the beginning of reclaiming the physical confidence that is still yours to have. If today gave you something, whether it answered a question you've been carrying or opened a door you didn't know existed, I would love for you to share this with someone who needs to hear it. A friend who's been grabbing counters, a parent who mentioned feeling weak last week, a neighbor who stopped going on walks. You sharing this video could genuinely change the trajectory of someone's health. And please leave a comment below. Have you been experiencing any of these symptoms? Have you found something that helped? Your experience is valuable, and this community grows stronger every time someone speaks up. We are all in this together, and that matters more than most people realize. Thank you for being here. Take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one.